so you can see our balance. Next, I'll very much like to invite Andrew Fenton, who's the Director of Standards Transformation, NHS Digital, who tell us about his personal views about how we should, well, the title of the talk, he'll introduce about the past, present, and future of standards development. So look forward to that.
Good morning. So thanks for inviting me to come and talk. So I feel slightly fraudulent standing here talking about standards where there are people in the audience who've been involved in this far longer than me, as we'll see in some of the slides. But in my new role, which I've been taking on very recently, I think I've been working with the team since January, I've discovered a lot, and so what I want to try and do is give you a big picture, a broad picture, rather than drill down. So I'm going to raise us up a few levels from a kind of organisational perspective or system-wide perspective and see what's been happening. So firstly, a look back. So the National Informatics Programme has been evolving for going way back to, I think, 1980-ish. People may want to correct me. So it's been recognised quite early. I don't know what everyone else was doing in 1980. I was still at college, but just moving towards my final year, and I was getting involved in the early days of computer animation. But this was a different area, obviously, and the committee, there was various iterations of what we now call in effect, the Information Standards Board, operating up to about 2009. One of the developments in that period, around 2005, 2009, was the initiation of a support group, the Standards Management Service, which was a team that is now still in existence that operates to assure and appraise standards. So I'm going to use the word standards throughout this presentation in the context of a national informatics programme. So I've noticed through all the fantastic lectures from yesterday and today, people have been talking about standards, and I've been asking myself, what do you mean by that? Do we say that fire is a standard, or is it a resource set which we are looking to achieve standardisation? So I would like us to challenge, as an outcome of this summit, to think about our use of that language, because I personally find it very confusing when someone says to me there's an information standard and it comes through as actually what it is a data collection for commissioning purposes, national commissioning purposes. And is that, of course it is a standard because it's in the Health and Social Care Act 2012. And this is an important, for me, in my experience of this area, this is an important element of the system now, as we currently are, because out of the Health and Social Care Act, we have something evolved called the Standardisation Committee for Care Information, which was chaired by Martin Severs, and in fact Martin's involvement in this process has been from reasonably early on. So the Health and Social Care Act really gives information standards a kind of legal status. I won't repeat that on the screen. So providers, well, I will repeat it. Providers and commissioners of publicly funded health and social care services must have regard to them. Now that's a short sentence, but actually there's a lot of devil in that, because actually it's the providers and the commissioners that give regard, and regard is a legal term which I believe in summary means you've got to have a pretty good reason not to do it. Yeah. However, vendors, providers of services, don't have to have regard for it. So that in turn gives us a continuous challenge. The Act itself has given NHS Digital, formerly in the Act it's HSCIC, the Health and Social Care Information Centre, legal powers to collect data. It establishes SCI as a standardisation committee for healthcare information is as the body to recommend approval for information standards. Okay. Now, I don't know how this fits with your picture of what standards are. I know when I was I had a sort of software development company in Cambridge for 20 years actually, and I wouldn't have recognised this kind of world at all in terms of implementing standards. I would look for international standards, I would look for WC3, you know, that would be my interpretation of a standard. The Act, interestingly, requires that all information standards must be consulted on, so that's a big change actually, and actually it's led to quite a, I would say, an expansion of the work of Sky itself, because consultation becomes a fairly lengthy process. It isn't, you know, NHS Digital takes that quite seriously. It doesn't necessarily consult as thoroughly as one might expect with some things that require big business change, but it does do its best within the resources and time that it has. But it's one of the reasons that things, in the perception out in the wider environment, is that standards, formal standards, information standards, take a long time to develop and publish. Well, one of those reasons is because there's a big process. So what's been achieved through all of that? Well, actually, I don't know personally. But what I do know is that the reason for information standards is one of the reasons we're all here. We're saying it's to enable interoperability. I think it is, but what does interoperability give us as an outcome? It gives us many things. And the consistent capture and use of data for direct care and for secondary use is at the core of that capability. Some of the successes I know have been, although they're perhaps a bit old, things like Edifact in the early days, CDA. I think terminologies and classifications are a success story, although now we've got complications because there are too many of them and there is some overlap. They've nevertheless given us that opportunity to standardise. DM&D is actually the UK sort of branch of medicines information that goes into SNOMED. But actually, my understanding of the story of DM&D is that they went back to scratch. So it's a very valuable resource that's unique to the UK. I think some of our data collections and extractions are also have global envy. Although we know they're not as good as they could be, HES and GPES and many others are quite revered. So we've had quite a GP to GP. There are lots of examples of historic things where we probably don't think of them as advantages and helping us, but actually they've been quite helpful to us. We have a set of accumulated assets and of collections and extractions within this. Probably 100 plus collections into NHS Digital alone. This is a minuscule proportion of data that flows and is collected, but in terms of data sets, that's not insubstantial. Most of them are monthly collections, for example, 25 from acutes. There are 70 plus collections going to the CCG and the commissioning systems, and there are 34 that are generated by CQC and NHS Improvement. I don't actually know how many are generated by Public Health England, for example. Must be reasonably substantial. So we don't actually have a full picture, and I certainly don't have a full picture of what is collected and extracted and could be brought to bear within these discussions. So in effect, some of these collections are kind of snapshots, and they've got a fairly defined context. So when you ask for a collection or an extraction, you've got to define that context very clearly, because there are, in the assurance process, we have to look at meaningful use, legal use, etc., the IG context. And one of the now, as part of the consultation and assurance process, we need to consider the burden. The red tape challenge has come into the narrative on how we discuss things frequently. Setting up collections is lengthy, bespoke, often involves duplication. This is the current state. An ability to ensure the reuse of existing data isn't limited. It's, in my experience, sitting on Sky, I used to sit on Sky when I was CIO at NICE. In my experience, reuse of existing data isn't considered at all secondary use. So there is a fairly siloed, focused view on people's use case. Currently, linkage is valuable but time-consuming and politically a hot potato. And across the health and care domains, there's a mixed data capability. Now, I know that some colleagues of mine are going to speak about social care after me, but actually I was involved working with the department for a couple of years trying to get social care on the map properly. Now, it's amazing to think that there are no national collections of client-level social care data at all. There are aggregate, well, in fact, there are some, I think, DOLS, which is around deprivation or liberties, is collected at a person level, but that's a very limited set. But everything else is aggregate. So in a system that's looking at integration and interoperability, we have no client-level data flows across boundaries. There is a pilot going on in the Northwest, which I think has got is the first legal one, and there's a direction for that to happen, and I think it's going to start flowing in June. So mixed data capability. So the maturity isn't just between acute, primary care, community care, mental health. There's a massive gulf of 30 years of investment in health versus social care. So in summary, in terms of the past, I think we could safely say we have a secondary use capability at a national level. So it's been built with that in mind. But we have lots of expertise, resources, capability, to enable semantic interoperability. We have a lot of knowledge. We have a lot of international expertise and well-renowned international expertise within our gift to bring to bear. So I think that would be my view of personal view of where we are. So what's actually happening now and gearing for some change from April? So there have been some what we might consider as change agents going on in the last few months. I hope everyone's heard of the National Information Board. If not, there'll be a couple of slides to help your understanding go forward here. But basically, there's something called the Paperless 2020 portfolio, which is where 4.2 billion of funding to 2020 is being organised. That's going to be quite an area of focus as a change agent. There's something called the Sky Review, which has been looked at. The work of Sky has been reviewed in detail, and there are going to changes happening with that, which I'll tell you about. And there's something called the Standards Development Assurance Review, which is where I come in. I was an independent reviewer, and now I've been asked to lead some change in this area. And clearly, there's the emergence of greater stakeholder collaboration. This event demonstrates that. And we have the socioeconomic and demographic policy drivers. Social care and delayed transfer has been in the news quite a lot recently. So to very briefly move on to what the National Information Board is about and the Digital Delivery Board governance, it's there on the screen. I won't go through in detail, but basically the CCI-CITO has been given the authority and the responsibility under the Digital Delivery Board to manage this portfolio of delivery to 2020. It's split into 3 sub-boards. One, Data Coordination Board, will take responsibility of Sky. So there's a line up to the Secretary of State directly to the Data Coordination Board. So the legal responsibility is going to be with the Data Coordination Board, and then there's something that Richard Jefferson and Will Smart and others, everyone, it's a big group of people that are looking to form the Enterprise Architecture Board, and there's an investment board. So effectively it's the what, how much. That's overseeing the delivery of the portfolio, and underpinning that is the NHS Digital development capabilities, etc. In terms of assurance, it's now going, assurance process, i.e. that team I mentioned, is now reporting into effectively the data coordination board. So it is still going to carry responsibility for assuring burden, IG, safety, have responsibility for consultation assurance, and that's going to be underpinned by the clinical and IG assurance. In terms of the review, I won't dwell on this, but I captured what was needed to be done in terms of the change in NHS Digital to meet system needs needed a pull. The pull was going to come from the design authority. That may not happen, but I think we need to, that's my start point. And there's a lot of priorities there. Have we established you know, the programme? Not quite. Are we going to by end of March? Probably. So I'm trying to keep on track with these short-term priorities. But as you can understand, as one person going into an organisation, looking at existing teams, etc., it's going to take a little while to get momentum. In terms of the design authority, and excuse the differences in titling, at the time I did these my maps, we hadn't settled on a name for the authority, but actually we still haven't settled on a name for the authority. But basically, you'll notice there are some key things here that are relevant to everything we've been discussing today. For example, we're looking at data strategy. That will have some form of technical reference architecture. It will have some form of data architecture, a logical model that straddles health and social care. We need to do that. To do that, we need to baseline current standards, and I mean international standards, etc., and don't think to redo them. And then there's going to be things like a review of the tooling, a review of process, a review of actually the portfolio of collections. Now, this isn't all going to be done by the design authority. The design authority will provide some form of steer and oversight. So this will be done within the programs, etc. Oops. So some of my key activities are going to be around establishing the design authority, and it may be that it's housed in NHS Digital, it may be it isn't. We need to see that. We need to look at engagement with the internal teams, the product owners, the functions. I've got a particular remit to develop and work with the PRSB, who are going to be a key partner, a strategic partner in this process, and with others, but certainly with PRSB, who are going to be a strategic partner for NHS Digital, and obviously we're going to start engagement with the wider system. I've had a few preliminary discussions with EMEA, and we hope to expand that going forward. The relationship with the Data Coordination Board and the Enterprise Architecture Board and its subgroups is going to be key to this. From April, I hope to begin some form of work around a data architecture. Yesterday, a lot of people were pointing to a need to have a reference, a framework of reference to develop. And I think we can now step forward and start developing that in some way. It's something that's been missing in the system. I think there have been some other attempts in the past, and it's been put on the very difficult pile. But I think we need to have a go and seeing if we can help developers of fire resources, etc., to be creating their Care Connect profiles within a context. And that includes, obviously, the difficult challenge of how SNOMED and the relationship between that and fire. I need to start delivering the SDAR recommendations, the Fundamental Standards Review. That means looking at OPCS and ICD and saying, what's the future? How's it going to look? What's our strategy for that? I mentioned tooling. And of course, the release strategy. I think DM&D is released weekly. You might expect it to be even more frequent than that, given potential risks, safety risks, etc. but SNOMED as a whole is 6 monthly, I believe, yeah. So what's the operation model for standards development within NHS Digital, etc., etc.? Looking further ahead, I think one of the areas that I was involved in with the SDAR review, the Standards Development Assurance Review, was I was asked to look at the leadership model for this. And I've got a slide after this which is a summary of my thoughts on that. But I think a key to this is aligning how does NHS Digital going forward in a world where things like interopen exist, etc. What's our role within the system? What does the system as a whole need, and how do we prioritise that? And what role does therefore NHS Digital play in that? How do we optimise our resources, which are shrinking within national ALBs, etc.? Our resources are shrinking. How do we make our tooling available and get more bangs for our bucks in terms of giving the wider system access to co-produce, potentially, and how we don't stifle local innovation. So this is the slide on leadership. At the time I did this slide, I was thinking, well, actually the current model is the only organisations that can legally publish a direction is NHS England or the Department of Health or Secretary of State. And so I put those two names in the top left. But that may not happen that way going forward in the future. But the key thing here for me is linking need with implementation, the arrow at the bottom. So, and this is obviously NHS Digital focused, but actually one of the challenges we've had in the past is not saying we're going to adopt SNOMED as the terminology for health and care. It's the, well, so what, how are you going to get it delivered and implemented? And a key theme of the work I've started to do is how do we link saying we want it with responsibility for delivering it. And that to me is our key collective challenge in the room. So the roadmap for future state, for example, how are we going to develop system responsibility and maturity? So we might want to be thinking obviously of moving from this detached silo, constantly maintaining interdependencies, our interdependencies, to something that is genuinely more integrated, simplified and collaborative. How do we deliver benefits sooner? The business case lecture, which was really helpful, kind of pointed to that. What is actually viable to deliver and how quickly can we do it? So does our business case always have to rely on we're going to deliver something in 5 years or 3 years? What can we do that's viable? Do we have to be perfectionists? With clinical safety, you might argue yes, but across the board, are we a bit too perfectionists? I think in terms of NHS Digital, we probably need to look at our data architecture to go from collection for secondary use towards extraction from direct care use. And to do that, we need to tackle the problems that Jeremy, etc., have identified. Obviously, we need to, in NHS Digital, what I'm finding is that we have quite siloed functions. I mean, it's an organisation that's been pieced together over many years, and the teams operate fairly in silos. I think most of the team have got transferable skills, particularly in the areas of terminology, classifications, etc. We need to bring those transferable capabilities to bring to bear on the most important challenge now, as well as keeping everything working. And that means also helping the system to help us, rather than saying we need this, we need this, we need this. What is the system-wide priority? What should we do first, second, third? So making Michael's story a reality, I've tried to hook that in, EMEA. I think in terms of standards as I've been discussing it, I think there are some, you know, I may not remember everything that I've written down in my notes, but I think, first of all, in this scenario, the GP is getting a discharge summary. Okay, well, electronically. So that sounds really good. Does it include the care plan? Because a care plan was mentioned. So where was that care plan devised? It wasn't devised by the hospital pharmacy. So I think, you know, getting a care plan and a discharge, we need to link those things together in this scenario, in this target world. We also need to tackle the problem of things like medications, dosage, syntax, things like that. If it's coming from acute, how does it land for a GP? And how is that then relating to a person looking at something on his app? In this case, Michael. So he's got a cold, and I wondered whether his app contained his personal information around allergies, etc. Because the fact that he's meant to take this and he wants to take a new medicine, means that actually there's a potential risk here. So what's the scope of what we're doing with an app for Michael, and where are the potential risks here? Where is that risk held? So if he does go to the pharmacy, one assumes that his record is at the pharmacy, so that they can look at that. I don't know. I'm just hopefully pointing out some wicked issues that we need to address. He wants to withhold some information. Well, I think Martin handled that well yesterday. I don't have too much to add to that, except I'm a bit puzzled that he wants to withhold information from the pharmacist, but's quite happy to give it to a carer by giving him his app. So I think key to this is presumably his care plan has gone through to the local authority, and this is all happening. What's withheld from the local authority? If there was a scenario where he wasn't going to have DOMS care, but he was going to have a residential stay, then actually does that medication information follow there, etc.
Wasn't that about the patient choice? Wasn't that Michael's choice?
Yeah.
To withhold information?
Yeah, that was his choice, yeah. So his choice, but Martin says, well, yes, you either withhold all of it, essentially, or none of it. But is not the physiotherapist a health professional? Yeah, I don't know. Why just say doctors and nurses? So what is a clinician? Okay, so I'm just some wicked issues. So that's about it for me. I think I'm on time. Yeah, thank you.
I got this time. Well, thank you, Andrew. I think you're going to have a few exciting months ahead with regards to standards development. And I like the message about collaboration, because that's what we are all here about today. And I think you highlight something that I guess struck with me, is that actually we've been amazingly good at collecting data, isn't it, for secondary use. And I think there's a real opportunity moving into primary use. But we've done that, isn't it, in GP land. As a secondary care physician, I keep forgetting that, but you've been receiving standardized pathology messages, for example, for 15 years. So we have all the capabilities and people in this room, in this country, to do this kind of stuff. And it's all a matter of how is it going to look. And hopefully when we are here this time next year, maybe in the next Interop Summit, we'll have very different kinds of messages and the talks, and we'll be much further ahead in our journey. So on that note, it's lunchtime, but I'll give you something to think about during lunchtime. So the panel discussion, I haven't seen many new questions except T-shirts. So on T-shirts, I think you know this is an IT conference when they say, does the T-shirt come in XML? So maybe XNL. So panel questions, please. If not, me and Amir will take over. So you don't want that to happen. And more importantly as well, right after lunch, we'll hear about health and social care data integration. Okay, thank you. Have fun.